Valerie, the Deputy Executive Director of World Food Program, our alumna. To know more, I call upon Gauri of class of grade 12 to give a welcome. Over to Gauri.
Hello. Ms. Valerie is the WFP's Assistant Executive Director for Program and Policy Development. In this role, she leads work across humanitarian development peace nexus to provide food, cash, and technological assistance that helps people and nations to meet urgent needs, build human capital, and improve food security. Prior to her appointment in January 2018, Ms. Valerie served as the WFP's Regional Director for East and Central Africa. Ms. Valerie holds a Master of Arts from the School of International Service in American University in Washington, D.C. Ms. Valerie, it's a heartfelt pleasure to welcome you here, and we are absolutely delighted to know about your incredible journey and passion. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Gauri, for enlightening us. But I'm sure we will get to know more about Ms. Valerie if she speaks to us about her long journey to reach where she is now. Let's put our hands together for Ms. Valerie.
Class of '84! Woo! I can't tell you how wonderful it is to be back at Kodaikanal for the first time in 40 years. So belying our age, but I guess the '84 did that anyway. It's amazing. It's still as beautiful as I remember, and even more than the beauty is really the emotion that overcame me, and I think overcame all of us when we came back to this place. The friendships that you form, the connections that you form in Cody are like nothing else. At least that was my experience and our experience in our class. And the foundation that it gives you for a life of service, if that's what you choose to do, is really, you know, that has no comparison. So I really credit Cody for putting me in the position to be able to have a job where I get to have impact every day. And I think, you know, when you're here, you're always told you can do anything you want to do, you can be anything you want to be, and certainly Cody prepares you for that. What you do with that, of course, is up to you. I have the great honor and pleasure to work at the World Food Program. I've just had my 24th anniversary there in last month. And so what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about the World Food Program, and then I understand that you have some questions for me that maybe kind of peek under the hood at my career journey, but also some of the issues that we might face at the World Food Program. So first, just to sort of start, and we have some slides for you about what is the World Food Program. So the World Food Program, we like to say it's the world's largest humanitarian organization. And the scale is important because we assist, on average, 100 million people every year. But we reach in tough years, as the past few years have been, upwards of 150 million. Now, I've just done my first work mission to India. I was in Delhi and I was in Orissa, and actually the scale that we work at globally is so dwarfed by the food safety nets that the government of India deploys. So, you know, it's a bit humbling to talk about scale in the India context. We feed, last year we fed 160 million people. India's public distribution system reaches 850 million people on an annual basis. But we're working across 80 countries in the world to provide the assistance that we provide, and that gives us sort of a dynamism of the work where you really need to find ways to make things work. And WFP is the operational arm of the UN system as well. So what do? We deliver food, cash, technical assistance, nutrition support to meet needs in emergencies, to promote food security, to help people be more food self-sufficient, and we have a number of flagship programs through which we do that, which I'll talk about in a moment. Our work is done with partners. We partner with governments, we partner with communities, we partner with other UN agencies like UNICEF, agencies like the Food and Agriculture Organization. We partner also with non-governmental organizations like Catholic Relief Services, World Vision, local non-governmental organizations, and national ones as well. And through these partnerships, we're able to deliver. A lot of the UN is funded through these assessed contributions, where member states have to pay a certain amount to the UN, and that money is channeled through some of the agency's funds and programs. WFP doesn't benefit from that. We start from zero every year, and we are completely voluntarily financed as an organization. The bulk of the money from the World Food Program comes from governments, but increasingly we also are funded by the private sector and through individual contributions, and that's an area where we are looking to grow and change. Now, one of the most exciting things in my tenure, my 24 years at WFP, happened in 2020. 2020 was a very difficult year in many respects for all of us, with COVID and the way it wreaked havoc, and that continued into the following years as well. But in 2020, we had the great honor of winning or being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And the Nobel Peace Prize was so important for us because it really helped to confirm that link between conflict and hunger, and that inextricable connection that comes between the two. Many of the people who we support around the world are fleeing conflict, are faced with conflict, and conflict is also a main thing that challenges our work in countries around the world. When people are forced to abandon their land, sometimes abandon their families or get separated from their families, they lose their homes, they lose their jobs, they're dependent on assistance and the generosity from abroad, and that is not something that anybody ever wants for themselves. And so when people are not able to feed themselves and feed their families, that brings a lot of tension, that brings a lot of strife. When I was in Cody, I don't know who your big musicians are these days that you listen to, but we were obsessed with Bob Marley. And in Bob Marley and the Wailers, they talk about a hungry man is an angry man. And that plays out in countries around the world when people are unable to get enough food because they're cut off from their land or income. They can't grow enough food, they can't buy enough food, and they have to depend on that for assistance. So the Nobel Peace Prize really amplified and highlighted that link between conflict and hunger, and the critical importance of peace and stability in the world. It brought attention to the role that WFP and our partners play in addressing this. And it was just, for us, I mean, in my work, I stand on the shoulder of giants, all the colleagues who also came before me. We've lost colleagues in the line of duty. We lose colleagues every year. And so this really felt like it honored their sacrifice and honored the work that we and our partners are doing around the world. And that work is more important than ever because we're going in the wrong direction as far as hunger is concerned. We set a goal, the world set a goal with the Sustainable Development Goals. It set a goal to reach zero hunger by 2030. And unfortunately, hunger is growing instead of shrinking. We saw the chronic hunger, just that inability, the fact that 757 million people go to bed every night not really knowing if they're going to have enough food the next day. And that's really a tragedy in a world that produces way more than enough for everybody, but that food is not equitably available or distributed. There's also more than 300 million people that face acute food insecurity. And these are people whose consumption scores, whose malnutrition levels are in a crisis mode or in an emergency mode, and this usually comes as a result of some kind of a shock, but sometimes shocks that play out over the years. We also know that, that malnutrition continues to wreak havoc around the world. 148 million children are stunted, so too short for their age, and 45 million are wasted, and wasted, which is acute malnutrition, when you are too thin for your age, is very dangerous, and severely acutely malnourished children are at grave risk of death. We have the tools, we have the means to prevent this. We also have the means to treat it, but often issues of access, issues of security, issues of not having enough financing to do that work gets in our way. So what are the main drivers of hunger? I talked about conflict before. More than 200 million people of the acutely hungry people are hungry because of conflict, because conflict has separated them from their means of production or their means of livelihood. And this is just the number in the countries where we work. Increasingly, we're also seeing climate lead to increased hunger. We know that climate shocks cause droughts, they cause floods. The unpredictability of climate and the climate seasons means that people don't necessarily know what to plant, when to plant. The crops that they're planting may not be fit for purpose given the climatic conditions. We also know that irrigation isn't sufficiently available for most people. They're depending on rain-fed agriculture. So that puts them in a great vulnerability to climate shocks. And so increasingly, and on a sort of increasingly steep trajectory, climate is driving hunger needs around the world and acute hunger needs around the world. And then economic shocks are also driving hunger around the world. When you see price spikes in the market, inflation, where food suddenly costs 200, 300% more, even 1,000% more in some markets, then suddenly people are priced out of the market from one day to another. Their income isn't increasing anywhere near that level. But governments also are increasingly facing debt burdens as they try to service the debts that they have incurred over years for the range of things that they have been doing. And so the fiscal space at the national level also hinders the kind of responses that would be needed in order to help mitigate and manage through these economic shocks. So those three elements tend to be driving hunger and lately tend to be converging in a way that's exponentially driving hunger needs upwards. So just to give you a little bit of a picture of the WFP structure, we have 6 regional bureaus around the world. The Asia Region Bureau is in Bangkok. We have a regional bureau across the world in the Panama region, serving Central and Latin America. We have a Cairo Regional Bureau that covers the Middle East, North Africa, and now Ukraine, which never used to be an operation for us, but is now one of our biggest ones. And then we have 3 regional bureaus in Africa, one in West Africa covering the Sahel and West Africa coastal, one in Southern Africa covering the Southern African countries, and one in East Africa that I had the privilege of leading for 5 years. So that's our sort of regional infrastructure that we have at WFP. Our headquarters is in Rome, Italy. So like probably many of you, I was a global nomad, moving around a lot. It turns out now, after 3 times serving in Italy, that I've lived in Italy longer than I've lived anywhere in the world. So that's where our headquarters is, and about 2,000 of our 24,000 employees are based in Rome. And we work then in 120 countries and territories, 80 of which we have sort of fixed country offices in. We're known as an organization for for the vast supply chain network that we've deployed around the world. And we had to develop that because initially the role of WFP was to take the surpluses from the surplus-producing countries, mostly in the global north, and bring those surpluses to the deficit countries, mostly in the global south. Over time, that has shifted, and most of the food that we deliver, we actually buy locally or regionally, because often you have surpluses in one part of a country and deficits in another part of the country, and it's just a question of moving it together. We try to purchase as close to the people who we're looking to serve as possible. We also aim to procure, whenever possible, from smallholder farmers, from women farmers, so that we can also use our procurement to help drive that kind of change, which is critically needed. So that vast supply chain network that was needed initially to move food, and now to buy and move food, we have adapted it over time to also be the largest cash provider in the UN system. We provided $2.3 billion worth of cash last year to populations where food was available in the market, and the best way to help them access that food was through a cash transfer. We would provide food that way as well. And then we also have these specialist centers for innovation and for, we call them centers of excellence. We have an innovation center that's based out of Munich that is an innovation hub where our own and partner activities have an opportunity to sort of take an idea and help take it to scale. But then we have a center of excellence in Brazil, a center of excellence in China, and hopefully soon a center of excellence in India. That was part of my role in the past week here, was working with the government in Odisha about setting up a center of excellence in India. In Odisha, it would be our first subnational or state level center of excellence. And center of excellences are great because they become hubs of looking at in the country what kind of innovation, what kind of progress has a country made with its systems, and how can that be shared for other countries who are looking to learn from governments. And the possibilities in India are incredible because our work in India is only technical assistance. We help the government make pilot innovations and then roll them out in their large-scale public distribution system. So we have a small operation but huge impact, so that they can have supply chain optimization, so that they can be reaching people more effectively, so that the nutrition programs can be delivering nutritious commodities produced by women at the, linked to self-help organizations. That's one of the things that we are working on. But we do these innovations in partnership with IIT. They have a public service lab that they run, and so we're able to connect big brains from the tech industry with big problems from the public sector to find ways to solve those problems and deliver impact. So this is the India model. If when it finally launches, will really be the jewel in the crown of these Center of Excellences, which provide wisdom and guidance and technical advice for government public programs around the world. So I mentioned that we're in the business of both emergencies, but also the longer term and food security. Just a few of our major activities. I mean, we provide food and cash in emergencies, as I said, but we're also looking to ensure that all children around the world benefit from a nutritious meal in school. And so sometimes that's about us delivering those school meals. We reach around 30 million children a year through our own school meals programs, but more importantly and more impactfully, it's about promoting national school meals programs and making sure that they are as effective as possible, they are as nutritious as possible, and now we're taking the next frontier, which is trying to make those public programs climate smart as well. And so these are, this is one of the big ways in which we work more kind of in the development sphere. We also work on food systems and how do you transform food systems so that they're more equitable. We're not the seeds and tools entity of the UN. That's really more where the Food and Agriculture Organization steps in. But we work at the pre-production stage, the post-production stage, and the value addition stage in order to help bring more effectiveness, higher yields, and less food waste in the food system through storage, handling, and efficient and effective movement. And that procurement that I talked about before, public procurement, can be a very powerful driver in food systems change. Because if you have a public procurement program like the public distribution system here, and you decide that you're going to be distributing now fortified rice in that program rather than unfortified, then suddenly not only are you having a nutritional impact at a much bigger scale, but you're also starting to drive market availability of fortified grains in a new direction. Or if you decide that your public distribution program is going to source 20% of its produce from smallholder farmers, then you're starting to give an incentive to smallholder farmers who often struggle with prices and fluctuality, and so you're able to give them that sort of incentive. So you can use those public procurement systems in order to drive change. So that's some of the work that we're doing in the changing life space, because our view is that we don't want to just be feeding people today and solving that problem today. Everybody wants to be resilient, self-reliant, they want to feed their own families, and they need to be able to feed their families in a context of a world that is changing, a climate that is changing. So really helping them to do that is where we aim to be. Governance, we have an executive board that's based out of Rome. It's made of 36 member states. They meet 3 times a year. It would be like, if any of you have ever done those sort of model UN type programs, it's a little bit like that. We gather as a leadership team and we have to present things for our board to approve, our budget, our policies, our programs. They give us feedback. Sometimes we like their feedback. Sometimes it's a little bit annoying. But in any case, they are our bosses, and so we have to adjust and adapt and get them on board. And in getting them on board, we're stronger because then we have their governments who are also there supporting us with their programs. And when I talk about government supporting us, I'm not just talking about donor governments giving us money, but also our program country governments who both invite us but also finance much of our work. For instance, our work in India is financed by the government of India and the private sector. It's not financed by, it's a very small proportion of it is financed by our kind of traditional European or American donors. We're also looking, I highlighted that we want to engage the public more in individual giving, because what we found over the past few years, I talked about growing hunger. So hunger is growing, but the resources aren't keeping pace. So the support that we're getting from governments is steady, it's generous, but it's not growing alongside those growing needs. There's a lot of other pressures on governments. From the donor perspective, that debt burden that I highlighted puts a lot of pressure on our program country governments. Private sector is a growing area of business, but private sector money tends to be quite opportunistic, let's say. So you have to find really a connection, a niche. It tends to be short term. It tends to have very little flexibility, and the way things change, we need a little bit more flexibility. So we're looking at really increasing our footprint in the individual giving market. This is something where some of our UN partner organizations like UNICEF, some of our NGO partner organizations like World Vision are far ahead of us. But we do have this very cool app called Share the Meal, which has been kind of breaking into that space, and it allows people to make small contributions or larger contributions, usually around a particular campaign. And we found some emergencies and some markets have been particularly conducive to mobilizing resources quite attractive, or nutritional programs for mothers and children. So that's one of the ways in which we're growing our footprint in the individual giving space. And then one other sort of fun thing, and this was something that was developed by some students, now it would be about 17 or 18 years ago, was this free rice app, where you could play a game, and by playing the game, partner organizations had agreed that it's sort of almost like an SAT prep kind of a game, and as you're doing it and as you get things right, then they make donations like matching donations basically. So you're donating your time and playing the game, but the companies are donating money towards the World Food Program. So that's another creative way that we are getting, we sort of are looking at the space. And in both the case of the Share the Meal app and in the and with the free rice, these came from young people, these innovations. So one of our big priorities moving ahead is to make sure that we are able to harness young talent, grow young talent, retain young talent, but also sort of keep things fluid. The UN as an organization is a big bureaucracy, and so it has in the past been a place where people came and did their career, and then they came sort of more at a more advanced stage of their career. It's not where they came first, and then they stayed until the end of their career. The way the market is now, it makes more sense for it all to be more fluid, for us to have more fluid hiring practices, but also for people to be moving, into the UN earlier and out of the UN earlier, and maybe in and out doing different things. So these are some of the practices where we're also looking at some innovations in our own system to see if we could be an employer of choice, but also an employer that's better positioned for this modern age. So I think that's all I wanted to share with you up front. Let me just check. The slides will be available for you. But yeah, I heard you had some questions for me, and let's have some fun answering them.
Thank you, Ms. Valerie, for inviting us, but I'm sure that was really awe-inspiring, and thank you for sharing your experiences. And like me, I know many students here are really motivated to serve the world, if not like you, at this big scale, maybe we could light a small candle to spread warmth and care.
Now we have the question and answer session.
So, how is the World Food Program addressing food crisis in conflict zones like Gaza and Ukraine? And what are some specific challenges you face in such areas?
So yeah, working in conflict is super tough, and Gaza has been one of our most difficult operations. I don't know if any of you saw this, but just a couple of days ago, one of our vehicles, clearly marked and working on a route that had been explicitly deconflicted, was shot at 10 times by the IDF. While proceeding to do its work. So this isn't the first time that this has happened. It's the first time that we've been shot at directly, but several months ago I attended the memorial service in DC for the staff members, the employees of World Central Kitchen, who were killed under similar circumstances. So security, making sure that our staff are secure, is the toughest challenge that we face in working in a conflict environment. We have a duty of care to our employees. We have systems set up with security officers, with networks, with contacts that aim to make sure that they can do their work as safely as possible, but often that doesn't happen. So security is a huge preoccupation and is the biggest issue that we face working in a conflict zone. The second one is access. So often there's somebody who controls the area where people live that you're trying to reach. And often in a conflict, they either don't want you to or don't have the sort of authority to support you in reaching those people. So you can't provide assistance if you can't access people. Now sometimes if you've already set up a whole network with electronic cash transfers or something, you can provide that assistance from afar. You would still want to be getting in and doing some monitoring, but in many circumstances that's not the case, and you have to establish those supply lines. So ensuring that you have access and that access is continued and unimpeded is key. And right now the biggest issue that we're facing on that is in Sudan. Famine has been declared in Sudan. Sudan is traditionally one of our largest operations around the world. The main entry, we're trying to bring food into Sudan through various entry points, but the main entry point is one of the border crossings from Chad. It's a border crossing called Adre, and up until 2 weeks ago, the government in Sudan, one of the government parties in Sudan, was blocking access through that border. So then it's all about employing humanitarian diplomacy, pressure, carrots and sticks in order to get that access. And then once you get it, now we have a window of 3 months, then it's all about the operations to move as much as you can during that period while keeping the pressure on to make that short-term agreement a long-term agreement. So security and access are the biggest issues that we face as operators. And one last thing is then what the people are facing. So while we're facing security and access issues, the people we're trying to reach have core protection requirements. And so understanding the risks that people will have to face to access assistance and designing your program in a way that does the best that you can do to mitigate those risks is also a key issue. So if people have to cross physically a conflict line in order to get assistance, then that's going to be a problem for them, particularly for women. If they have to go through multiple checkpoints or even a checkpoint, that can be a problem, again, particularly for women. So really that analysis that helps you understand the risks that people face and doing anything that you can to help mitigate those risks. Those are the 3 issues that we face in conflict.
What strategies in the World Food Program implementing to combat malnutrition in less developed countries, and how do you measure success?
So we know with malnutrition that the first 1,000 days is critical. The 1,000 days from conception through to a child's 2nd birthday. So that means that pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and children under 2 are the top priority for malnutrition interventions. And malnutrition interventions can be done by ensuring people have access to a healthy diet with the right vitamins, minerals, fats, proteins, all of the things that you all know that you're trying to get in your diet. But it also then, in a situation of emergency, means particular nutritious supplements that can provide really a big punch. So there's lipid-based products, peanut-based products that can deliver a high amount of nutrition in a very small quantity. And so these become deployed in an emergency situation. There's porridges, light porridges actually, that we're making here in India and introducing through the nutrition centers, where you can then make sure that mothers and children get the nutrients that they need. So ensuring that people have the nutrition they need, particularly at that critical stage of life, is key. It does play out through schools, so the first 1,000 days are important, but the next 6,000 days are also important. So school nutrition is key, not just ensuring that all children have access to a nutritious meal in school, but also ensuring, or not just ensuring that they have a meal, but ensuring that that meal is nutritious. And so a lot of public programs can, be, well, we'll just make sure everybody's got a biscuit, or everybody's just got some rice, but you want to make sure that that meal, which for some kids may be the only meal they're getting or the best meal they're getting, is as nutritious as possible. And then we're working at the kind of dietary level to ensure that when we provide food assistance, we provide as much nutrition as possible through that food assistance. We're not doing as well on that as I would like, because we are funded by donors and the money comes in a kind of varied way. Our pipelines sometimes kind of go like this, and so we will be cutting rations for some people 1 month, and or missing a particular, no pulses this month, only oil and grain, and this isn't good. So we're looking at ways and actually engaging with the private sector to try to find solutions that help us provide an even flow of good nutrition rather than these ups and downs. So those are some of the ways we're addressing malnutrition in our programs.
Hi, Ms. Valerie. So my question for you is, what role do you believe that developed countries should play in supporting the mission to eradicate hunger? And how can they contribute to the World Food Programme's efforts?
Developing countries?
Developed countries.
Developed countries. Developed countries should give generously. They should give generously to programs that work around the world. I think developed countries also should invest in national systems, because while we have the opportunity as programs and initiatives to pilot activities or to reach a certain number of scale, it's only the changes at the national level that can really impact the hundreds of millions of people and really move that needle. So investing, again, not just in sort of projects, but also at the systems level is key as well. And developed countries also need to be equitable in how they support countries. It can't be, we only support our friends, or we only support countries that vote with us in the General Assembly. It needs to be a human approach that really, invests in programs that work, system strengthening in an equitable way. So those are some of the ways that developed countries can support.
How did the World Food Programme respond to the food shortages caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and what were some of the most significant challenges you faced?
Yeah. So there were a couple of things that the WFP did at scale in the COVID crisis. One was that we, as part of our supply chain and logistics operations, we are also the aviation provider for the not just the UN system, but for the international humanitarian and development system. A lot of the places that we work aren't accessible by commercial airlines, and so we run with full ICAO certification. We run the humanitarian air service for the system. And in COVID, that air service became more important than ever. It became the lifeline, moving humanitarians basically in and out of countries to do their job. So one of the ways that we responded in COVID was really helping other organizations and our own colleagues do their job in countries around the world simply by flying them in and out, including having an evacuation service in the early days of COVID if they became ill. But countries, a lot of countries, faced issues with people who were cut off during COVID. They were unable to work and get money, and particularly day laborers and formal sector workers. They don't have these big savings accounts that allow them to stop working for a little bit and lean on that. Every day they're hustling to buy the food for the next day. And so a lot of governments looked at extending, either putting in place new systems to provide cash or to deliver food to people who were in need, and who weren't able to work because of movement restrictions or because they were sick. But some countries needed a bit of help to do that. So we supported countries either to put in place new delivery systems of food or cash to people who were cut off because of COVID. And then the third thing that we did were change existing programs. So a lot of the programs that we were implementing around the world were very physical, high contact programs. So whether it's, we had large-scale school meals programs, and so there needed to be a way to, if children were getting online education, I know it took the world quite a while to kind of get that going, particularly in developing countries, but people could be getting, if they were able to log on and get on school, yet they still also suddenly 450 million children were missing out on school meals because schools were closed. So we worked with communities at the community, subnational, national level to organize food delivery services so that those in-school food rations became take-home rations that were delivered to families in refugee camps where we were delivering monthly food assistance. We had to revamp the way in which food was delivered so that people weren't coming and congregating and lining up in order to get that support. So a lot of innovation was applied, doing things that frankly we probably should have been doing a long time ago. Nobody really wants to stand in the line in the hot sun and wait for a food ration. So it really forced us to decentralize some of our work and remove some of that physical contact from it.
What was your reaction when you were informed about the Nobel Peace Prize in 2020, and how did it impact the WFP and your work?
It was so amazing. We were on, it was 2020, so we were on a Teams call because we use the Teams platform, and we were talking about, just something that seems super urgent at the moment, partnership that there was a problem with, and it was a time when there weren't a lot of colleagues in the office because of COVID, and suddenly, my phone just started there's a beep, and then there was another one. I'm trying to ignore it, but it just completely starts blowing up, and so I pick it up, and it's just like, we just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and and everybody in the same Teams meeting was also getting similar messages, so we just all started screaming. We ran down the hall. We were just sort of like running up and down the stairs, finding the people who were there, screaming, shouting. It's Italy, so we had Prosecco in the fridge, so then we gathered and we did a toast. Then the media started coming, and they were gathering outside the building, and so we started, offering little snippets. But it was a super emotional moment. Our executive director was in Niger at the time. He was meeting with the president, and someone had to walk in and give him the news. Around the world, colleagues were just celebrating, rejoicing, crying, because it was also that emotion of thinking of, all the things, all the people we lost, all the times that we failed, and this just felt like the recognition for that and the acknowledgement for it. So yeah, it was tears and cheers, and it was amazing. We couldn't have a big party. That was the only downside. That year, we didn't even get to go to Norway for the celebration. They came to us and did this sort of, studio handover of the Nobel Peace Prize. I threw a little party. We were allowed to gather in Italy at the time, 30 people outside. We had this beautiful Nobel Peace Prize cake. But yeah, we didn't get that kind of big, raucous celebration that we deserved. Not that year, at least.
So, what initiatives is this program implementing to reduce food wastage globally, and how can the individuals contribute to this effort?
So the main ways in which we're working is to really strengthen to consume. But at the farm level, the 85% of food is wasted. So it's making sure that farmers have the means to dry their food, if it's grains, to store their food properly, and working on those sort of transport and storage systems. So that's not something that we do alone, but it's something that we work with partners and we work with governments and communities to really strengthen those food systems at the farm level and farm to market level.
Yeah. So how is climate change affecting global food security? And what initiatives is the World Food Programme undertaking to mitigate this problem?
So climate is one of the major drivers of hunger and food insecurity around the world. And some of the things that we're doing to address it are we have been piloting and we're the architect of a major now African risk insurance capacity. But we work around the world with micro risk insurance so that, ultimately farmers should have the same kind of insurance that we have when you own a house and there's going to be floods that are going to be happening. You have insurance that allows you to get a payout if certain hazards happen. So we've been working to create similar levels of risk insurance for poor people, basically, so that they can have risk insurance premiums that when a drought happens, they get a payout that helps them meet their needs. So getting food in the hands or getting cash in the hands of people early on the basis of certain risk indicators or certain shocks is one of the things that we are doing. Another thing is anticipatory action. We have over the years fine-tuned really good remote sensing and data that allows us very often to predict when disasters are going to happen and the impact that we're going to have. Making sure that people, again, particularly poor people living in vulnerable locations, have access to that information. And then, instead of waiting till the crisis happens or the shock happens and then giving them a cash payout, for instance, you do anticipatory cash, where there's small payouts provided at the risk of the shock that enables people to take action to protect their families, to protect their assets. It saves lives, but it also saves costs of the eventual humanitarian action that's needed afterwards. That's an area where we've seen really good return on investment, but we need to take to scale. So we're looking to our donors to help us to take that to scale. And then a third way where we are working on climate is degraded land. A lot of land, if you look, for instance, across the Sahel, a lot of the land in the Horn of Africa, a lot of the land is degraded. The water table has been sinking, and it can be put back into production to grow, in some cases, crops, but also fodder for animals. And so helping people harness water better, restore degraded land, raise their water table, produce drought-resistant crops. These are all areas in which we are working with partnerships, bringing our respective skill sets to the table. And then maybe just a fourth way is we work with encamped populations often in refugee camps, and the degradation to the environment that happens from, we're giving food or we're giving cash for people to buy food, but then they've got to cook this food. So they're going into the forest nearby and they're chopping down wood, and so that is, the deforestation. And so fuel-efficient stoves for camp populations, fuel-efficient stoves for institutions like schools is another way in which we are working to address climate change. Thank you for that question. Oops, no.
What are some of the most memorable experiences from your field visits?
Every time I go somewhere, it's just it's amazing. So just this week, I've been here in India, and I was in Orissa, and we have piloted this new grain ATM. It's called Anapurti, and it's been piloted in 2 regions, but in Orissa they have the first standalone one. And it's so cool. I mean, these are people for the public distribution system, which is huge here. People have been they have to go to these fair trade shops. Krishna told me they're Russian shops, not fair trade shops, to get their food. They're not necessarily treated there like sort of customers and clients. The time doesn't always work for them. They don't always have what they need. So it's not always a great experience. So government's been really looking to improve that customer experience, basically. And one of the ways in which we piloted, again with this public systems lab out of IIT, is this grain ATM. So it works like an ATM does. I mean, people go up, they have their card, the regular card that everybody in India has. Yeah. And they put in a PIN code. Then their entitlement comes up. They decide how much of that entitlement, because it's 25 kilos, I think, per person. They decide how much of it they want to be collecting that day. They push the button, and then the bag is there. You can only take 50 kilos at a time because they don't want the bag to overflow. And it just comes shooting out the chute. And and I was talking to people who had been there, and they were just saying, I mean, it's game changing because now they can come when they want. They're operating 24/7. They get their grain, and it's and it's no fuss. So this is the kind of thing, when you see it, it's just exciting because it kind of seems so obvious, even though I didn't invent it, but it's really cool. So that's something that makes me really happy when I see smart things doing that makes an experience for people better. I also it's always amazing when you go to schools and visit kids, and and you go in the classroom and you talk to them about what they're learning, what they're doing, what they want to be when they grow up, and they're getting school meals. And we know that school meals help bring children to school, they help keep them there, and they help them learn. And I love kids. I've got 3 of my own. I used to help run the daycare center when I was here as a Cody student. So anything that puts me in contact with young kids and they're happy and they've got so much energy is great. So for me, I always love the visits to schools and the visits to the school meals program. And then women are just amazing around the world, and but the women in Africa are just are just extraordinary. So when you go out to a village, and we've been working, we work in so many, but last I was in Somalia last year, and Somalia is a country where I started my career. And the women are beautiful, and they're just so strong. And they, you just, with a little bit of investment, a little bit of training, they just make the most out of it. So when you hear a woman talking about, not about what you've given them, but what they're doing with it to take it to the next level, how they've grown their income, how they're, selling more, growing more. For me, that's just super cool. So I get experiences like this every day. I've got a really, really cool job, but each one is better than the next.
What are the most challenging aspects of your job, and how do you manage to work with them?
I guess the most challenging bit is that it just, it's like a treadmill, it never stops, and that's not hard because it's tiring, so maybe a treadmill's not the right analogy. It's just hard because it just weighs on you. I'm all in everything that I do, but particularly in my work, and so it's heartbreaking, when you're not able to reach, that community that you want to be reaching. When you're not able, because of access, or when you're not able to provide the quality of support that you want to provide because you don't have the resources to provide it. I mean, for me, that's the challenging part of the job.
So my question is, how can young people get involved in the World Food Program to reduce food waste and ensure that no child goes to bed hungry?
I mean, I think the best way for young people to be involved on hunger issues is to start in your community. Understand what the hunger issue is in your community and how you can help. As young people, you have time, you have energy, you have some resources, and even a little bit of resources can make a difference. But I think, start in your community and build out from there. Getting informed about the issue is also super important. And, I think you can find good facts and stats on our website at WFP about global hunger. There's many other organizations as well that you can find information. But just get to understand the issue better and what some of the obstacles are that are blocking people's access to food. And then from that, think about where you can bring the most value. And sometimes it may be by finding an organization that you believe in and contributing to that. Sometimes it may be by, pursuing a degree in, public health and working on nutritional issues, or getting involved in public service and changing things so that, in your community, the policies are the right policies to be driving change. Or it can be joining the Peace Corps or the equivalent in your country, or volunteering, for a program or working for a non-governmental organization. So I think all of these things are ways in which you just have to find the way that connects to you. India has a huge hunger problem. And it's, this is one of my classmates or friends asking about, Sanani asking about India's hunger problem. India has a huge hunger problem. And the public distribution system is one of the ways that India is looking to address its hunger problem from two fronts. On the one hand, providing a predictable package of support to 850 million people every month. There's really no other country that has a program of that size. But also using I talked about how you can use public procurement as well. The give for the people is an important piece of that, but the buy is also an important piece of that. The fact that the grain that's purchased for that system is coming from farmers, and that basically all farmers have a guarantee that they can sell their grain to the system is a very important contribution to hunger. There's also programs around school meals, the midday meals program, and there's programs around mother and child malnutrition and the ability of women and children to sign up for all of these, for programs that enable them to have access to specialized nutritious foods, but also health services and training that helps them improve these. Now, so there's a really good basket of programs that are out there. Is that enough? No. The programs aren't as efficient as they need to be. That's one of the things that we're working on, but it's work that takes time when you're engaged in in something of this scale. The main reason that the government works with the World Food Program, it works with other institutions as well, is that it can be very politically difficult to make any adjustments in a program of this size. There's vested interest, there's, you can get kicked out of office, there's all sorts of issues. So they sort of use us as the guinea pigs in that space to do trial and error, figure out what works, see what's palatable, and then take it to scale in a state here, a few states here, nationwide if it makes sense. So, so that's something that needs to be, continuous, is the need to make it as efficient as possible. Are these programs as effective as possible? No, they're not yet. First, it's good. I'm sure people appreciate getting grain every month, but probably it's going to some people who really don't need to get that grain every month, and more support could be going to the people who really need that. So, normally you'd be looking at a more targeted program, quality over quantity, and that's something that it can be politically challenging, but making sure that that program is effective and is delivering better nutrition, maybe not just grains, maybe other food sources, cash perhaps alongside food. This is the largest food safety net. Many countries have these sorts of protection programs more in the cash space, so there's elements there. And then the other piece is the inclusion piece. And for instance, I was just in Orissa. I was there for the first time, so I was learning about it. Probably some of you know more about that area than I do. But what I learned is that 25% at least of the population are on tribal lands, and they're tribal populations. And right now, the public schemes don't reach these people as effectively as they should. We know that, in the UN, under the Sustainable Development Goals, we talk about those furthest behind, reach those furthest behind first. Whether, marginalized communities, tribal communities, often women, disability, people with disabilities are often left out of these kind of schemes. So really having dedicated efforts to make sure that they're prioritized first is an area that India for sure needs to continue to work on.
Thank you, Ms. Valerie. Due to the time constraint, we will have one last question.
So, which team do you support, orange, white, or blue?
Sorry guys, I'm blue all the way. Go blue!
Thank you, Ms. Valerie, for patiently and gracefully answering all of our questions. We wish you all the best for your future endeavors.
Now I have an offer and work from grade 12 to present a vote of thanks. Ashu?
Respected Ms. Valerie, as we say goodbye, our hearts are filled with gratitude and our minds are buzzing with inspiration. Your presence here today has been a precious gift, and we are so thankful for the time you shared with us. Your passion for a hunger-free world is infectious, and your stories have touched our hearts in ways we never thought possible. We will now dare to serve more or waste food. Your experience through the COVID-19 crisis to meet the food need was inspiring and showed your dedication for the downtrodden. Thank you for encouraging us to be the change maker our world need. Thank you, Miss, for being an extraordinary role model, mentor, and a friend. We'll miss you, but we'll continue to be inspired by your remarkable spirit. We wish you all the best.
And now of these classes are available